Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. Our next guest is currently on Broadway as the Genie in Disney's Aladdin. And after seeing his performance last night, I can honestly say Michael James Scott is amazing in the role. Please welcome to the Build stage, Michael James Scott.
Oh,
hey.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, congratulations. You are incredible as the Genie.
Well, thank you.
You're hilarious. You move beautifully across the stage, and you also show us how exhausting it would be to play the Genie. It looks like an exhausting role.
And subtle. It's a very subtle role. It's very exhausting.
Extremely subtle.
Yes, very exhausting, and figuring out how to pace yourself, like all of those things that, you know, it's basically everything in the kitchen sink thrown into one role. That immediately, and you have to just go. It's a train from the jump, you know, and the train is leaving the station even if you don't want it to. It's going. So.
But also the Genie has so much choreography while at the same time has to look casual. Like the whole idea of the Genie is that he's pretty cool and he's on top of everything. So even while you're dancing and moving around, you have to look kind of cool while you're doing it. You can't be like the other actors who are very precise, who look precise.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. You know, finding the Genie, finding how for you to lead the role as opposed to the role leading you was and still is a very sort of daunting task to figure out how to make that actually happen, because you do have to have a swag with it that is kind of really, really at ease, but yet it should also feel like dangerous, you know, as well, that you don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know what's going on.
Was that something that you were able to find when you first started working with the role, or did that develop over the course? Because you've been with the role for some time now.
Yeah, I think, the crazy thing about it is that, you know, when you're given the role, it's like the craziest thing, I think, when I was like, they were like, you're going to play the Genie. And I was like, really? Like that's really happening? But because...
Wait, why was that your response? One, because you were excited for it, or two, you're like, I'm going to play the Genie from Aladdin? What?
Because I never, ever expected that I would play the Genie. It was never on my radar. It just was something that I didn't even think about. Like, it's crazy how the universe brings something into your life that you didn't even know that you really needed, you know? And I needed it for many, many things that we can chat about. But I think it was just that. It was the immediately having to, like, strip away everything and really getting to like an authentic place, because the Genie is all heart, you know, like he's like love and light and heart, and you can't fake that, you know? So it's an interesting thing from right away to figure that out in rehearsals, to start playing, but still have this thing on top of it, you know? And so where's the actual heart of this?
I get that sense from you, though, as a person. Can I ask, is that something that has come to you from playing the Genie for some time? Or were you a person that was light and filled with heart prior to playing the Genie? I'm pretty
a light person, and I'm pretty a positive, very optimistic kind of a person in general. So that element of it is pretty easy for me to tap into, and I love to laugh, and like that's kind of for me what life is about. So that part of it was absolutely pretty easy for me to tap into, and I think it's what the director and the creators sort of saw in me as to be able to play the role as something, again, like I said, I didn't even see really in myself. It's because you don't go around thinking, hey, I'm light and love and laughter. You know what I mean? So, if we did that, you would probably be like, oh, really? You know what I mean? Like,
if someone says they're a fun guy, they're not a fun guy anymore.
Exactly. So, you know, and if you and there's like a very small, like maybe 5 people who could probably get away with actually doing that, you know, saying that, you know, and you being like, all right, I'm gonna let them, like Robin Williams could say that.
I don't think he would.
He wouldn't, exactly. But if he did, we'd be like, absolutely, yes, you could. But he wouldn't say that. That's exactly right.
Do you even think about Robin Williams when you take this role? Do you think about his original performance at all?
You know, I didn't. I mean,
Smart, because you just can't replicate that.
You can't, the icon, the entity that was Robin Williams will forever be like, you know, beyond. And
so singular.
It's so singular. And that's why the role became iconic, you know? So when when Disney brought this to the stage, they actually went back to a lot of the original essence of the Genie, and so it's very different from what we think of as a Robin Williams doing it, but the foundation of the thing that is Robin Williams is all there.
Right.
But to be honest with you, I promised myself to not think about that, to not think about Robin and really like just think about Michael, because if I did, then you really get into your head. And with a role like the Genie, when people are already expecting, they come in with expectations of, well, let me see what he's gonna do. You know what I mean? Like before, you really can't think about that. And when you have a company like Disney behind you and trusting you to do you, that's unbelievable.
One of the smartest things that the show does is have the Genie open the show.
Yes.
So the Genie opens the show, and then you spend the rest of the first act waiting for the Genie to come back.
Yes, exactly. And it's this cool sort of like moment in time that happens when he comes, because he's welcoming you into the world. Like, all right, like this is Agrabah, this is our land. Like this is what's happening tonight. And it is this anticipation of like what's happening when he comes right before he comes back.
But that surprise appearance from him in the opening removes any sort of expectation for what he should be based off of what you've seen before. So by the time he goes away and you're waiting for him to come back, as soon as you appear near the end of the first act, everybody's cheering. You get almost a standing ovation just for coming on stage.
I'm like, thank you, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll take it. I'm coming out and I'm going to get an applause. Thank you just for coming out.
And you
good night.
do play with the audience a fair amount.
Yeah.
And there are moments, I think it's at the end of A Friend Like Me,
Yes.
right? Where you kind of like bow over and over and over again, forcing the audience to continue
To, like,
to clap.
continue to clap.
Not forcing, they want to continue clapping. You're not holding them hostage.
I mean,
But how much of that is rehearsed and talked about beforehand in terms of like how much you can play with the audience and what you can say, and how much of it is you getting to feel this each different audience every night?
Well, I will say it is pretty set.
It has to be for something with that many moving parts.
Exactly. And the thing about it is I am the only character that gets to break the fourth wall, which is so cool. I can sit and talk to the audience and, be like, how you doing? Oh, okay. And the cool thing is that, you have that connection right away. But what I think is so brilliant about it, and exactly as you said, is that it kind of takes away an expectation of what you think the Genie is going to be, really, So I think that was brilliantly crafted from our creative team of how that sort of gets the show going. And then when you come back, we have parameters of like what we can kind of, what we go off of. But the cool thing is that, we kind of each have kind of added like our own little Genie thing into it. So like, for example, there's a moment, you remember last night where like the scarf and the glasses that happened in the second act, when I happened to rip out my sunglasses and my scarf and I walk through the door.
You walk through the door. Yeah.
That's something that like, that's specifically a me thing that we got to create for the show.
Really?
Yeah. So, which is really cool. And I love that, like, it was kind of like my little stamp of little extraness to sort of like add on to it. I mean, I'm wearing an ascot today, for God's sake. You know what I mean? Like, so why not do something, like, so yeah, so it's kind of, there are those kinds of things where we get to do that. When I was in Australia, in the very beginning of the show, the Genie pulls out, he pulls out the Statue of Liberty out of his pocket. And in Australia, we got to pull out a thing of Vegemite, which is like this Australian delicacy.
I honestly wish you did that in New York too.
People will be like,
yeah, it would be so baffling, and there'd be no reason for it.
No reason at all.
Wait, so the Genie is Australian? I don't understand.
What's happening? Are we, are there kangaroos now or camels? Like, what's actually going on?
So where were you when you got this part? What was going on in your life?
So I was doing the Book of Mormon. I was in the original company of the Book of Mormon.
Congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
amazing.
Thank you. It was part of the very first secret reading of the Book of Mormon.
Wait, what was that like?
Crazy. I mean, all right. Well, so I had just done Jerry Springer the opera at Carnegie Hall. Yes.
Life is crazy.
Life is crazy. Where I was singing, like literally belting things that I would never ever say, really in life, probably, on the Carnegie Hall stage. Like, that's craziness.
So that's how they kind of knew that you could come into this and you could potentially, and you could like, well, you could treat something that on the surface is silly with a sort of musical theater gravity.
Yes, and they were probably like, okay, well, he's not afraid to do it. Okay, great. Like, let's get him in here. But that's exactly what happened. I was asked to do this reading. I had no idea you just say yes. You learn in this business, like, you just say yes on little things that maybe you have no idea that are gonna turn into things. And this was a little sort of like secret kind of reading that was happening. There was no title. It was actually called the Untitled Musical Project.
Did you know that it was Trey Parker and Matt Stone?
Not a clue until I got there. Now and they know this. Trey and Matt know this. Like, I was not really a South Park person. It just wasn't my thing.
I'm sure that I can't imagine that bothered them.
No, it didn't. Like, and in fact, it actually kind of because they have a like huge following. They're Matt and Trey. Like, they are a whole thing. I didn't really know who they were, and so I was kind of like, how you doing? You know what I mean? Like, what's going on? Like, hey, all right, and they were sort of coming into our world. I my career has been on Broadway, and so I'm like, who are you? But like, not like that really, but and I just these men are insanely brilliant. And so when I realized who it was, I was like, oh. And when we actually did the material, we did only like the first act. Only the first act was really written. And very different from what it is now, but a little different. I knew I had to be a part of it. Like, I was like, I will do whatever it takes to make sure that I'm available to do this, because this is crazy brilliant and will be something that people will never ever like. There will never be anything like it ever. So that team, Bobby, their executive producer, Ann Garofino, Scott Rudin, like all of those, amazing people, Stephen Aremus, who did the musical arrangements. This team was like a dream team. And it's actually where I met Casey Nicola, who is the director of Aladdin, the musical. Aladdin the musical, Disney's Broadway musical. I met I met Casey during that thing, and then we will have from that point we did 5 Broadway shows together. So again, you say yes, that's all. When I say that, it's just this cool thing of like, I had no idea where life would take me. And I was in this room doing a secret reading of what would become the Book of Mormon, and then I would eventually be singing "I Have Maggots in My Scrotum" on a Broadway stage and on a recording that my mom was very proud of me that I said all of those things.
One of the great experiences I've ever had in the theater, and I go to the theater all the time, both musical theater, off Broadway, whatever, and was sitting in a theater and looking around at the audience during Book of Mormon and just seeing tourists, like not hip, cool New Yorkers or whatever.
Yeah.
People of all different ages laughing hysterically and getting Book of Mormon.
Absolutely. That's exactly the case. When we did our very first preview, there was like all this security and stuff, like at the state, like they didn't know what was like, because
Right.
what they didn't know what was going to happen, and cut to, and at that very first preview, there were lots of Mormons from Salt Lake City who came in to see the show. They had heard about it. They came in to see the show. We did the show, and literally from that night, we all knew that, like, was basically going to explode. It was craziness, and nothing happened. People were just, they loved it. Like they were just,
Undeniable.
they were blown away by the brilliance of, the writing and the music and what was going on stage. Like they just didn't really, it kind of blew their minds. And it also created this conversation. When you go to theater, I think it's important to be able to like go home and like talk about it, like, or go out to dinner and be like, okay, so what how did that evoke? What did that evoke? And the conversation happens. And there was a lot of conversation happening after the Book of Mormon. My aunt is, may she rest in peace. When she saw the Book of Mormon, and now this is a woman, a black Southern church lady, hat wearing. She was married. My uncle was a preacher, So we're talking that, and so I was like, okay, you coming to see the Book of Mormon, all right? And she came to see the Book of Mormon. After the show, I walk across, and I was like, so what did you think? And she was like, oh, it was amazing. Well, I mean, they're not talking about my God. And I was like, okay, like that. And I say that because that to me was the brilliance of the show, because it made people think in a way that that they did it. And whether or not she believed that, like that's exactly what the show was trying to do, which is brilliant. Like that she thought that. And that's okay. It's just it just runs a gamut of like what actually was going on, which is so cool and a blessing and really a gift to be a part of.
Where are you from originally?
Orlando, Florida.
You're from Orlando,
I
Florida.
am from Orlando. Like, we exist. There are people people are like, you're from Orlando, Florida.
I'm sorry.
But I know I'm from Orlando, and I love Orlando. Like, I mean, it really, in Book of Mormon, there is a song about Orlando, which is hilarious. And I remember when they first did it, they were like, Michael, and I was like, thank you for the Orlando reference. That's hilarious. Like, because it's all theme parks and like chain restaurants and, things like that you're like, what's actually happening in Orlando? But we exist, and it's really cool. And I went to a performing arts high school where I got to meet a lot of incredible
How
friends.
did you know prior to high school, performing arts high school, that you wanted to be in the arts, that you wanted to be a performer? When did you start singing?
Well, my mom said I sang before I spoke. So I basically was just a like chubby chocolate kid running around wanting to perform for anyone and like whenever. Like, I'm not even joking. My mother's like, I would on the street, I would be like, hey, mister, and like saying it, you're like just like this little like chocolate chubby kid like coming at you. They're like, okay, so we got to put him in. Let's figure out what we're gonna do with all that. So there was a lot of energy that surrounds the ascot, and like you figure it out, and that I mean I just basically had been I was born a performer. I know it's like so cliche, but there was nothing else I wanted to do. I would make my brother, my cousins, I would dress them up, I would always play the ingenue roles, like, and the leading lady.
So you got the sunglasses and
sunglasses.
Yeah.
So because they were like, we can't only go in and play the girl roles, and I'd be like, okay, fine, I'll do it. You know what I mean? Like, I'll do it, and I'll play the roles, and like I would dress them up, and like we would do all these crazy shows, and then I basically in show choir when I was in elementary school, my teacher was like, went to my mom and my dad and was like, can I take him to a children's, basically like a children's theater, a children's group that performed around Orlando, and they were like, sure, get them out like as fast as they could, and we did, and I would go, and that's my show kid thing happened, and commercials and TV shows, and that's kind of how it all began for me, and I just never wanted to do anything else.
Now, did you move to New York without a job and start auditioning, or did you get sort of touring company shows prior to that?
So I am that actor that I was very, very blessed. I actually moved to New York for a Broadway show. Right. So I always say, I finished college. I went to Webster University in St. Louis, Missouri, from Orlando, Florida to St. Louis, Missouri. Like, I don't really know what happened. But it was like, amazing, and I actually love St. Louis. It's like it's a second home to me now. But I went there, and while I was there, I ended up getting my first sort of like professional theater thing, where I was the standby for Ben Vereen in Fosse in Paris. I know, just
Wow.
crazy. They're like,
That's amazing.
what is happening? And Ben Vereen, who is Ben Vereen, like a legend, I was his standby, and I was a baby. I mean, I was 19, which is again crazy. Like, what was I doing in Paris, like at 19? Like from Orlando, Florida. I mean, I can't even,
What were you doing?
I was running around, basically doing the same thing as I did when I was little, like seeing people on the street being like, "Hey," no, I don't. The crazy thing about that time of my life is like when I think about it, I took it such for granted. Like the whole,
Of course, you were 19.
I was 19 and I was like, I'm in Paris. I just want to go eat crepes. You know what I mean? Like I didn't really know what I was. I couldn't even pronounce Seine. Like I couldn't really pronounce it. I was like Seine, the sea, the river. You know what I mean? Like what am I doing? So I basically that happened, and then I auditioned for the first national tour of Mamma Mia, where I danced in a wetsuit and flippers. Thank you. And it was quite an experience, but amazing. And while I was doing it, I closed that tour. I took we closed in Boston, and I remember taking the Chinatown bus from Boston to Chinatown, New York, and I auditioned. I went to an open call for a new Broadway show called All Shook Up. This was now 15 years ago, and it was a jukebox musical of all Elvis music. And I auditioned for All Shook Up, and I ended up getting a call back, and because I was in Boston, I was able to do that. I had to go back and forth. Sure enough, I don't know, I booked it, and while I was on the bus, the casting director called me. I had no agent at the time. Called me and told me that, and I kid you not, I was in the very back of the bus, and I was like I was just screaming, like in my head. I was like, "What is happening?" And as I got off, I called my mom because I'm a mama's boy, and we talk about everything. I called her and I was like, "I'm on the bus right now, but I got the show," and I was like, "I'll call you as soon as I get off so we can actually scream." And I called, and I got off the bus, and before I stepped right off the thing, she answered, and I just started screaming like right off of the thing. And of course, it was it's Boston, it was New York City, so no one even paid attention. They were kind of like.
So the story is that you landed in New York getting a part.
Yes.
That's incredible.
So,
do you not tell that story
I
around other actors?
know, but what I will say about that is that I went to an open call, and I'm saying that it is possible. So it's as crazy of a story as it is possible. And for somebody like me who, this little kid, this little theater nerd from Orlando, Florida, who just dreamed of being on Broadway or just being a performer on TV, on whatever. I had all these dreams in my head. I didn't think it was possible. I don't think it was, at that age, you dream about it. I don't know if you think it's possible. And I always I say that story because it is possible. And I love that it was an open call, and I walked in and I did me. And it is this thing about the belief in yourself that is so cliche, but you believe in the thing that you have is really special, and no one else besides you has it because they're not you. You know what I mean? Whether you're better than them, that's not really the case. It's that you're different, and your you couldn't be you, because I couldn't do you. So believing in that thing that you have, in your true, authentic self, and what that is that you have, it's a lot of self figuring out. But I'm telling you, it is the thing that has been a huge value in my career. Huge.
But it's also the thing that is required, as much as it's self-helpy, it's so required to be an individual hustler and to be kind of trying to prove that you are worthy of all these different things that you're trying to prove you're worthy of all the time.
Amen.
The only way to maintain belief in yourself.
Yes, absolutely. The hustle is real, like it really is, and I have friends all on the spectrum of success. Big movie stars to big, music stars because
I hope that your spectrum of success is like big movie stars to big music stars to big TV stars.
well, I'm saying that of just big to like big to big.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm saying oh my God! Now you have to realize it was said. But I'm saying that from that to literally, friends who have not booked their first Broadway show and or their first whatever it is, and I say that because the friends who are, and most of us, we all started. Those friends of mine, we all went to like the same performing arts high school, which is so crazy as well. Like that is also insane. But I also say that because the hustle that those friends who are doing these big things, it's for real. Like they actually hustled for it.
And probably still are.
And are still hustling, exactly. Like they are still hustling for it. So it's not to say that
It's only an upper echelon that don't have to hustle for it anymore.
Exactly. So I just sort of I use listen, and compare it leads to despair. So it's that's always a whole thing when people are like, well, what happens when you're not getting anything? And I always say, I'm like, once you get there, you still have to work. Yeah. So, it doesn't stop. And I think that's also the fun of it, because why would you want to, I don't know, like there is something also kind of gratifying in the sense that you have worked for it and you are working and you start seeing the fruition of what it is of the hustle, So I do believe that too, that there's a positive to it as well.
Speaking of big movie stars, have you seen
Thank you.
Have you seen the movie Aladdin?
I did. I saw a screening of it. Yeah.
What was it like to watch the biggest movie star in the world play your part?
Well, I will say this. I was so excited to get to see it, and we were all, like, of course, just anxious to get to like see what was going on. And I, in my head, there's like, on one hand, the number of genies who play the role in the world,
Yeah.
and there's this sort of like genie code, like this thing that we have that people don't really know because you're playing the role. And I remember watching it, and I was like thinking about Will Smith taking on the role of the genie and what that also meant for him, because as confident and as brilliant as Will Smith is, he, I'm sure was also like, oh my God, like
Right.
there's
You
a
gotta
lot.
do all that?
I gotta do really? And the cool thing was like, there was a moment where I watched and I kind of watched, I saw the like heart of Will Smith, like in the character. And I was like, oh, we're gonna be all right. You know what I mean?
Nice, yeah.
Which is really cool. And it's just sort of like this thing, like where I kind of just sat in the theater and I was like, I feel you. Like I got you, because there was that heart that came out, and as soon as that happens, you can fly with the role, And I was excited to get to see that, and I'm excited that a whole new generation of people are going to get to see Aladdin, and it's just amazing for the whole franchise. The show has been insanely successful, and so now, we have a movie, a new live action movie. So it's really, really cool that this beloved story has been just like, for these years and years. 1992 was the original animated version when it came out. So the fact that we're still coming back to that and people are still loving it is pretty incredible.
I'm sure he's great. I'm just gonna say, after seeing you last night, should have been you. We have time for a couple questions from the audience. What do we got here? Who has a question? Does anyone have a question? Oh, right here. Hi.
Hi, you sort of went over this a bit, but I was wondering, how'd you prepare for the role of Genie?
So I took inspiration from basically I stole from like everyone basically like of like all kinds of stuff. My grandfather, my father, Beyonce, like I mean literally everyone. There's probably all that in there.
Those are actually all three of those are the same person. Really.
They are all the same person. Absolutely, Beyonce is a genie herself. Like really, and so I wanted to, you know, I wanted to be the thing that was me and taking all of my craziness and sort of honing it into a thing. And what I started realizing is that I'm like, just look around you, Michael. You know, like look around you with the people in your life and the artists who you're inspired by, like Sammy Davis Jr. and Fred Astaire and you know, Aretha Franklin. I mean, seriously, like the list goes on of all these artists and people who are in my life who my uncle, who's literally like, I think one of the funniest people in the world. And, you know, he tells jokes at family reunions and they're hilarious. And I was like, just look around you. And so I started to do that and that it really started to shape the role for me. And I got to really play with these people and really like honing in that and exploring that. It was really fun. That's kind of how
How long do you feel like you'll do the role?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know. I think you know, I don't know. I think it all depends on, you know, the next thing. Like for me, these roles don't come around, you know, like this. So as an actor, when you get something like this and you kind of want to hold on to it as long as you can and as long as Disney will have me. So I'm open, you know, but I do know that, you know, the next thing that I do, I mean, while it won't be the Genie, of course, it has to be fulfilling, you know, and as long as I am on this road, like I've learned, just, you know, you'll go on the path that you're supposed to go on. So don't rush it. Just enjoy where you are right now. Sit in it, like ride it, and just be in it. So that's where I'm at with that.
I think we have time for one more question.
Hi,
Right here.
Michael.
Hi.
I was just wondering, you know, you've been in all of these incredible shows, and I was just wondering if you had any particular person that you would like, that would be your dream scene partner, like, or musical scene partner.
Ooh, that's a good one. You know, gosh, there's so many people. I think maybe, like. Probably like a Gregory Hines, you know, like one of the old cats. You know, I just think there's something about them that it would be fun to sort of like share. All the old song and dance men, women era, like that whole era is so exciting and so brilliant and so. We don't have a lot of it anymore, unfortunately, and I'm so inspired by them. And what they do is it's very difficult, you know, and they make it look so easy. So to be able to get to like share a stage with one of those cats, I feel like would be like the ultimate, because I would just learn from, you know, how to like basically not sweat but look like you're sweating. You know, I think it would be, and maybe Audra McDonald too. I mean, she's, you know, kind of ridiculous and incredible. And Meryl Streep. I mean, I keep going on. Like,
Michael, thank you so much for coming here and talking to me about your career and about Aladdin. Aladdin is on Broadway right now.
We are.
It'll be on Broadway probably forever.
It's gonna be on for a nice little chunk of time.
Michael James Scott, everybody, let's hear it.